The boy wasn't supposed to wake up. That was the plan. Quiet, clean, and forgettable except someone forgot to tell the dog. 12-year-old Malik Carter lay still in the sterile coldness of room 403, tubes snaking from his nose and arms, heart monitor pulsing a soft, indifferent rhythm. A week ago, he was running through the cracked sidewalks of South Chicago, chasing laughter with his cousins. Now he was somewhere between worlds, and everyone thought he wouldn't be coming back. Everyone except King. King, a golden retriever with graying fur and a service vest embroidered with Malik's name, hadn't moved from the boy's side since the ambulance wheeled him in. Nurses tried to coax him away with treats, with soft voices, with whispered threats. But King stayed. He growled when Nurse Heather approached the 4 line on the second night, his hackles rising, eyes fixed not on her hands but her face. Heather Simmons, blonde, polished, blue-eyed compassion laminated over calculated poise. She was the kind of nurse who got featured on hospital brochures. But the hospital's night shift knew something else. She didn't like certain kinds of patients. She had ways of handling them. Smiles in the day, syringes at night. The files always made it look like a heart gave out on its own. Malik's chart had a red underline on the second page. Asthma, anxiety, African American. It started with the medication. The boy had a panic attack the night he was brought in, understandable, given the trauma, but Heather noted agitation and upped to sedatives. On paper, it looked clinical, necessary, kind, except King knew better. He whined every time Heather entered the room, barked once sharp, and cutting when she adjusted Malik's oxygen settings. Dr. Feldman dismissed it as protective behavior. Heather smiled sweetly and muttered something about putting animals in their place. Then on the 4th night, King refused to eat. He sat rigid beside the bed, staring at the door. The overnight cameras later showed him nudging Malik's 4 with his nose, sniffing the line, whining at something invisible. That's when Nurse Jolene, a quiet woman of Filipino descent, started to worry. She'd seen Heather's behavior before, usually with the patients from poorer neighborhoods, most often with black families who didn't have the time or language to question authority. Jolene had suspected things, but King's instincts forced her eyes open. The hospital was supposed to transfer Malik to the pediatric ICU the next morning. But when Jolene checked the schedule, the move had been canceled by Heather. The file had a note, condition worsening. Transport not advised. Jolene didn't buy it. That night, she reviewed Malik's file. Dosage discrepancies. Notes added post-fact. No attending physician signatures. Everything wrapped in the sheen of protocol, but something stank beneath the bleach. By midnight, Jolene returned to room 403 and found King barking full-throated, desperate, staring at Malik's 4-pump. It was set too high, lethally high. Heather entered seconds later, the kind of calm that hides the blade. "Is there a problem?" she asked. Jolene didn't answer. She was already dialing the on-call doctor. When Dr. Feldman arrived, red-eyed and groggy, Jolene laid out the file discrepancies. She showed him the footage of King pawing at the 4-line, the overwritten notes. Feldman frowned. He respected Heather, but he respected evidence more. They ran blood tests on Malik. The results came back within the hour. Sedative levels were 3 times above recommended dosage for a patient his weight. Feldman ordered Malik's immediate transfer to ICU. Heather protested, but she'd already been removed from the case. King followed the gurney, tail wagging faintly, sensing something was shifting. The next morning, news spread like spilled coffee on Chris Scrubs. An internal review was launched. Heather was suspended pending investigation. But the real miracle came on the 5th morning. Malik opened his eyes. They were glassy at first, blinking against the fluorescent lights. But they found King, and then his mother, sobbing with disbelief. Then Jolene, silently watching from the door. Malik whispered one word. King. The dog's tail thumped once, then twice, before he pressed his muzzle against the boy's hand. Doctors said it was the right call at the right time. But anyone who saw King that night knew the truth. Malik survived not because of science. He survived because someone loved him too much to let evil win quietly. And for the first time in her career, Nurse Jolene filed a whistleblower report. But the story doesn't end there. Because someone didn't want the truth out. And they weren't finished with Malik or King. There were cameras in the hallway, but not in room 403. That detail became very important on the seventh day. Malik had been moved to a shared pediatric ICU suite, monitored by 2 nurses on rotation and 1 off-duty security guard doubling as a hall monitor. His vitals were stabilizing, his breathing had normalized, and he'd even smiled once when a therapy clown passed by thought he hadn't laughed. But King hadn't relaxed. Not once. The dog still sat alert at the foot of Malik's new bed, eyes fixed on every adult who walked in. He sniffed every nurse, leaned forward with concern every time a cart rolled in. When Dr. Feldman came for checkups, King eased up a little. But when any unfamiliar nurse entered, especially blonde, white women in scrubs, his ears flattened. That night, a nurse named Diane took over Heather's shift. She wasn't known around the ICU. She claimed to be floated from another wing. Jolene didn't like it. Something in her gut screamed wrong. She checked Diane's name badge and quietly noted the laminated ID was a few months out of date. When she flagged it to administration, they brushed it off. Probably a temp badge. Don't start drama, Jolene. But Jolene had started seeing the patterns. Diane spent a lot of time standing still in the hallway outside Malik's room. She wasn't looking at charts or patients. She was waiting for moments when other eyes were elsewhere. At 2:37 a.m., Diane stepped into Malik's room. King growled. Diane froze. She stepped toward the 4. King leapt. Not a bite but to block. His body positioned between Malik and Diane, teeth bared, chest puffed. The bark that followed echoed down the hall and woke up half the ICU. Security rushed in. Jolene arrived seconds later, trailed by Feldman, who had been sleeping in the break room due to a double shift. What the hell is going on? Feldman barked. Diane trembled. The dog is out of control, tried to attack me. Jolene pushed past her. She checked Malik's 4, scanned the pump. Then she pulled the syringe Diane had tucked behind her back. What's this? Jolene asked coldly. Diane hesitated. Feldman took it and inspected it. His face drained of color. It's the same sedative. But this could have stopped his heart. Diane tried to run. She didn't get far. 2 security officers wrestled her down just outside the room. King stood on the bed now, tail stiff, body pressed against Malik protectively. The hospital went into a media lockdown by morning. An internal investigation revealed something even darker. Diane wasn't a temp nurse. She wasn't employed by the hospital at all. Her nursing license had expired 2 years ago. She had once worked with Heather Simmons at a different hospital in Minnesota until 2 malpractice cases forced them both to leave quietly. No one had looked closely at their records during hiring. They both passed background checks using alternate credentials. Some HR shortcuts to save money had allowed Heather back into the system. And through her, Diane followed. The story exploded on local news. Fake nurse tries to kill black boy in ICU. But even the headlines didn't capture the quiet, systemic rot that allowed it all. Malik's mother, Tamara, went on television. Her voice didn't tremble. My son was treated like he didn't matter, like his life was disposable. They figured we wouldn't ask questions. They figured he'd just fade out. But his dog didn't let that happen. By now, King had become a national hero. CNN ran a segment titled "The Dog Who Knew." Schools sent drawings. A GoFundMe set up for Malik's recovery reached $300,000 in 48 hours. Activist lawyers offered pro bono representation to Tamara, and the hospital board faced intense scrutiny. But while cameras zoomed in on the family's strength, something quieter unfolded in the shadows. Jolene received an anonymous envelope at her locker one evening. Inside were photocopies, internal memos, flagged complaints, buried HR incidents all involving Heather, and a pattern of drug manipulation disproportionately impacting patients of color. She'd been shuffled between departments every time someone got suspicious. Jolene turned the files over to the DOJ. The federal investigation confirmed her fears. Heather had altered the records of 5 patients over 2 years, 3 of whom had died under unclear circumstances. But the hardest truth came later, when Malik was strong enough to speak about what happened the night he was admitted. It had been a panic attack. He was dizzy, confused, gasping for breath. Heather was the first person he saw. She had smiled at him, told him he'd be okay. Then she injected something into his fore, and he couldn't move. He wanted to scream. He saw the monitor spike, saw the alarm light blink red, but she turned it off. She adjusted something, and then it all went black. "I heard King barking," he said, voice shaking. "It was the last thing I remember." Feldman cried when he heard that. So did Jolene. So did Tamara. The board couldn't ignore it anymore. Heather was arrested, charged with attempted murder, conspiracy, and falsifying medical records. Diane faced the same, along with identity fraud and illegal access to restricted medical areas. During Heather's trial, the prosecutor did not hold back. "You targeted Black patients. You exploited trust, the very foundation of healthcare. And you would have gotten away with it if not for a dog." Heather showed no remorse. In court, she rolled her eyes when Malik's family spoke. She stared at King without a trace of regret. But the jury stared back at her with something stronger conscience. Guilty on all counts. She was sentenced to 40 years in federal prison without parole. The hospital restructured its hiring and auditing policies. A task force on medical racism was formed. King was given an honorary service medal by the mayor and invited to the White House with Malik. But through it all, Tamara kept her message simple. "My son lived because someone saw him as human. Not everyone did, but someone did. A dog, a nurse, a doctor who listened." She paused at the end of her speech at a National Health Equity Summit. "We can't wait for dogs to catch our evil. We have to do better before it gets that far." She wasn't wrong. Yet even in that darkness, a boy lived, and the world listened. Because someone barked when the silence got too loud. The courtroom lights were too bright. Malik sat beside his mother, legs swinging slightly off the seat too tall for him. He was stronger, now strong enough to walk, eat, joke with his cousins again, but the scars under his skin weren't physical. And they pulsed stronger every time he looked at the woman on the other side of the glass wall. Heather Simmons. Even in her orange jumpsuit, she held her posture like royalty. Chin high, eyes detached, a face trained for charm but void of warmth. Malik couldn't understand how someone could look at Hema Child and see a threat. But that's how she had seen him. Not a boy, not a patient, just a chart, a statistic, a thing. The judge read the sentence again for the record. Heather's appeal had been denied. 40 years, no parole, but it wasn't over. Not for Malik, not for King, not for Damara. They were home now, sort of a small house on the edge of Bronzeville, newly renovated with donations. A ramp had been installed at the front. The living room filled with cards, teddy bears, framed newspaper clippings, and a framed photo of King wearing a red cape from a local Comic-Con. Someone had written in Sharpie, "To the real hero." Malik smiled when he saw it, but that smile faded every time his mom answered another reporter's call, or when he overheard the whispers at school. "That's the kid they almost killed. That's the dog kid." Kids meant well mostly, but curiosity comes with claws. One boy asked Malik if Heather had poisoned him because he was black. Malik hadn't known how to answer. He just went quiet. Later that week, Tamara found him sitting in the hallway in the dark, King's head in his lap. "Do people hate me because of my skin?" Tamara knelt down, heart cracking in her chest. She didn't cry. Not then. "Baby," she whispered, "some people are broken inside. So broken, they can only see fear where there's beauty. But that's not about you. That's about them." "But it still hurt me," he said softly. "I know," she replied, hugging him tight. That month, Malik was invited to speak at a school assembly on kindness and resilience. Tamara was reluctant at first. It was only 12, but it was Malik who insisted. "I want to talk," he said. "They need to hear it." He stood on stage with King beside him, hundreds of middle schoolers watching, waiting for something heavy or angry. Instead, Malik smiled. "I didn't come here to scare you," he said. "I came here to remind you that sometimes heroes bark, and sometimes you have to listen even when no one else does." A girl in the front row clapped first. Then the rest followed. By summer, Malik's story had been adapted into a children's book. King didn't move. The publisher promised proceeds would go toward a scholarship fund for young black students interested in medicine. Malik's dream had shifted. He wanted to be a trauma surgeon now. He wanted to be the kind of doctor who listened. But underneath all the momentum, something darker stirred. One night, around midnight, Tamara received an unmarked envelope on the porch. Inside were blurry photographs, one of Malik walking home from school, one of King asleep by the window, and one of Tamara herself, grocery bags in hand. No note, no explanation, just images. She called the police. They opened a case, increased patrols, but they didn't find anything concrete. Then came the voicemail, a distorted voice. "Male, cold. You think it's over. It's not. He was supposed to die." The FBI was notified. Security increased. King received a GPS tracker and special training in alert barking. Malik had to switch schools. Reporters caught wind of the threats. Some labeled it white supremacist retaliation. Others tried to tone it down as post-trial unrest. But the message was clear. Some people were angry that Malik had survived, and even angrier that the world had listened to a black boy and his dog. Tamara refused to hide. She enrolled in self-defense training, installed cameras around the house, accepted a protection detail when the DOJ offered it. But the stress wore on them. Malik became quieter. He didn't sleep well. He stopped smiling when people mentioned the trial. King grew even more protective, growling at shadows, sleeping beside Malik's bed every night. Then, one night in late July, the backyard sensor tripped. Tamara grabbed her phone, heart thundering. The camera showed a hooded figure climbing the fence. She screamed for Malik, grabbed a kitchen knife. But before she could reach the back door, King was already out. The security system recorded what happened in night vision. King lunged. The figure tried to run. King tackled him. Tamara opened the door, screaming for help, her voice echoing into the neighborhood. Lights turned on up and down the block. By the time police arrived, the intruder was pinned under King's massive weight, whimpering. He was 19, a college dropout with ties to an underground hate group. Investigators later found chat logs, plans, target lists. Malik's name had been highlighted. The media storm reignited. But this time it was fiercer. What kind of country lets this happen twice to a child? Why did it take a dog to stop a hate crime again? Legislators began proposing new laws, better vetting for healthcare workers, harsher sentencing for race-based medical negligence, federal protection for whistleblowers. The case became a symbol not just of injustice, but of resilience. Malik watched it all unfold on TV. He didn't say much, until one night at the dinner table, he spoke up. "I want to testify again." Tamara paused, fork midair. About what, baby? About what it feels like to survive and then not be safe. She looked at him, and she saw not just a child, but a voice. They booked flights to Washington the next week. Malik stood before Congress smaller than the podium, but taller than his trauma. King sat beside him, vest clean, eyes steady. "I'm not scared of dying," Malik said, "but I'm tired of almost dying just because people think I don't matter. I'm not a mistake. I'm not dangerous. I'm just a boy with a really smart dog." His voice cracked, but he didn't stop. "Fix the system before it breaks another kid." Lawmakers gave a standing ovation. That fall, the King Act passed in the House a new federal protocol for verifying nursing credentials, mandatory racial bias training in all public hospitals, and an alert system for families to report sudden, unexplained changes in treatment plans. Malik's name was on the bill. So was King's. But even with change, healing takes time. Some nights, Malik still jolted awake from dreams where he couldn't move, where someone turned off the monitors and smiled while doing it. But every time, King was there. A warm nose, a steady breath, a silent promise. "You're safe. You are always worth saving." And slowly, one soft bark at a time, the world began to believe it too. Fall came to Chicago with brittle winds and yellow leaves clinging to cracked sidewalks. Malik had just turned 13. There was no party, no cake, just peace. And for Malik, that was enough. He spent the morning tossing a tennis ball to King in the front yard, the dog catching it midair every time, tail wagging like a metronome of joy. The neighborhood kids waved from across the street now. Some even crossed over to pet King. Fear had been replaced by reverence. King had become a legend. But Malik was still just a boy, one trying to live without always looking over his shoulder. A week after his birthday, a letter arrived. Not an email. A real, handwritten letter sealed in a crisp, cream-colored envelope with a federal insignia embossed at the top. It was from President Andrews. Tamara read it aloud at the breakfast table. "Dear Malik Carter, your courage, your voice, and your partnership with King have changed this nation. Because of you, children in hospitals are safer. Patients are being heard. Systems are being held accountable. And most importantly, you've reminded us all of a simple truth. Every life has value, and no child should ever have to prove they deserve to live. I hope you'll accept our invitation to the White House as an honored guest at this year's National Youth Bravery Ceremony. With admiration, President L. Andrews." Malik didn't speak for a moment. He just smiled. Not the smile he used for cameras, or the polite one he gave teachers, but a real one. Full and warm. King barked once, as if he understood every word. The trip to Washington, D.C. was surreal. Malik wore a navy blue suit and matching tie. King had a new vest stitched with silver thread, national hero. Everywhere they went, people stopped them, asked for pictures, shook their hands Malik's gently. King's paw respectfully offered like royalty. During the ceremony, President Andrews knelt beside Malik and whispered, "You saved more lives than you know." Then the applause began. But the moment that meant the most came after the cameras turned off. An older black man in a tailored suit approached Malik quietly. He introduced himself as Dr. Moses Langston, chief trauma surgeon at one of DC's largest hospitals. "I was like you once," he said, kneeling to Malik's eye level. "They said I didn't belong, that I didn't have what it took. But now I run the place." Malik's eyes widened. "Really? Really? And I've got something for you." He handed Malik a stethoscope. "It's not a gift," he said. "It's a promise. I'll be waiting for you 10 years from now. I'll save you a spot." Tamara cried quietly behind them. Malik held the stethoscope like it was glass. The flight home was quiet, peaceful, but Malik wasn't the same. He started studying harder, reading biology textbooks for fun, asking questions about anatomy, and most of all, writing page after page in a red notebook with a sticker of King on the cover. At school, he asked his teacher if he could do a special project instead of the standard history essay. He wanted to write about race and medicine, about the lives that had slipped through the cracks before his, about how close he had come. The teacher said yes. His classmates voted to publish it in the school newsletter. It was titled, "I Wasn't Supposed to Wake Up." The article went viral. Again, but this time, the attention didn't bother Malik, because now he was speaking on his terms, not as a victim, not as the boy who almost died, but as the boy who lived and made it count. By winter, Tamara had joined a national advocacy network for Black families navigating healthcare systems. She ran webinars, shared resources, taught parents how to track prescriptions and recognize red flags. She told Malik it was his fight that gave her voice. Meanwhile, King was getting older. He moved slower now, his jumps shorter, his naps longer. The vet said he had arthritis in his hind legs and maybe some early signs of kidney aging. Nothing life-threatening yet, but enough that they needed to think about retirement. Malik didn't take it well. "He saved me," he whispered one night. "I don't want to lose him." Tamara hugged him. "I know, baby, but he's not gone. He's just resting now, like he deserves." They built King a custom bed in Malik's room, added heated padding and a ramp to the porch, fed him the best food. The neighborhood kids helped repaint the fence and plant flowers around the yard where King liked to nap. That spring, a local sculptor unveiled a bronze statue downtown, a boy and his dog. Malik's hand outstretched, King seated beside him, eyes lifted, eternally watchful. The plaque read, "For those who speak when the world refuses to listen." And underneath it, King and Malik Carter, 2025. When the statue was unveiled, the crowd fell silent. No speeches, just reverence. The mayor asked Malik if he wanted to say anything. He stepped forward a little taller now. "Statues don't save people," he said softly. "Actions do. Voices do. Dogs do. You don't need to be a hero to speak up. You just have to care enough." Then he turned to King, who sat at the edge of the crowd, tail wagging. "I love you," Malik whispered. King barked once. 1 year passed. Then another. Malik entered high school. He wore the same stethoscope Dr. Langston had given him on his first day of biology honors. His teacher noticed it. Asked why. Malik smiled. "Because I've already seen what medicine can do when it forgets to care. I'm here to fix that." King passed away quietly in his sleep the winter of Malik's sophomore year. The entire city mourned. His photo ran on the front page of the Chicago Tribune again, this time under the headline, "The Dog Who Saved a Boy and Woke a Nation." Malik gave the eulogy at a candlelight vigil held at the statue. He didn't cry until the very end. "He didn't just save my life," he said. "He gave it back to me, and I'm going to use every second of it." Malik never got another dog. He said some souls can't be replaced. He went to med school, graduated with honors, and on his white coat, over his heart, he stitched a name not his own, King. In every patient he touched, every parent he comforted, every time he caught a silent injustice in the system, they were still working together. A boy and his dog, still saving lives, even after the barking stopped. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.